Good evening. I'm here after a bit of a break to show a really cool Rain World project that I've put together with all the awesome artists in my Discord server. It's something similar to the night mod concept, but a bit more involved. Only like 2 of these creatures are ones that I designed. This was a 2-week-long project where artists could suggest creatures and draw them of their own volition. Many more were suggested than actually ended up being featured in this video, so if you want to go check out more stuff, we've got a whole channel on the Discord server full of the creative processes behind this video. Anyways, I've got lots to show, so let's get into it. It all began with a prompt describing a region. In the midst of plains of crushed and waterlogged rubble, far from any standing ancient settlement, a great tower stands tall. Boasting structural integrity strong enough to withstand the torrential rains, this ancient fortification designed for a long-lost purpose, taller than any skyscraper and much wider as well, is a veritable city in its own right. The silhouette of it pokes right above the clouds, and many unique creatures call this place home. In order to access this place, Slugcat must find a shelter in the far left of Subterranean, which takes the form of an old train car. Miraculously, as the Slugcat rests, the train chugs to life and transports them far out to the base of the tower. As the Slugcat wakes up, they find themselves faced with an odd sight. Plant matter, far thicker than anything seen anywhere else in Rainworld, coats the ground and grows into the sky. They are able to grow large due to the shadow cast by the tower that protects from the brunt of the harsh rain. This region, known as the Shadowed Forest, contains the bulk of the flora and a large amount of the fauna in the region. Let's talk about that fauna and flora now, why don't we? Starting off with a creature that appears in most of the areas around the tower, the pearl bug. The pearl bug is, from a glance, no different to the pearls that lie in the dirt around the tower, but a closer look will show a lack of luster and a series of small legs emerging from the bottom. The pearl bugs are a species of small beetle that mimic pearls. They do this mostly to avoid predators, but in case they are chewed on, they taste absolutely horrible. They are clumsy and slow when walking, and even more so when flying. They have a life cycle very similar to cicada, in that they live most of their life under the ground as pale larvae. And when they emerge, they seek out other pearl bugs to breed and lay their eggs. Unfortunately, they don't even really seem to know what is a pearl bug and what is an actual pearl. This leads to major infestations around scavenger dens and tolls. For what should be obvious reasons, the scavengers aren't exactly too happy about this fact. Next up, the guiding gloomlight, also known as my shroom mentor, is a very tall poisonous mushroom that grows above the brush in the darkest of shadows. Their cap is easily disconnected from the stem, and their underside glows bright, but will close when potential threats near. If struck while in this state of defense, they will release a burst of spores that can poison Slugcat and other creatures, causing sluggishness akin to starvation. This poison does have quite a bit of utility though. It can be used to ward off predators if placed on the Slugcat's head, or can be used to poison spears stabbed into the underside. However, for the most part, these shrooms are mostly just living their own lives. Next up, hiding in the canopy is a far-off species of scavenger, quite different from the ones found elsewhere in Rainworld. Known as tree scavengers, they contain many different anatomical differences. They are much darker in color, their antlers resemble tree branches, and they have a prehensile tail. They make their home in large cavities carved out in the trunks of massive trees, and connect them together with actual rope which they have learned how to effectively make. Oddly, the tree scavengers themselves have orange glowing symbols drawn on their forehead with some kind of secretion or ink, almost in a religious manner. Perhaps they worship something? They do not know how to make explosives, instead resorting to more primal hunting tactics. The tree scavengers keep their pearls in a little pile in dedicated rooms in their homes, but they are also seen tossing several pearls out due to frequent pearl bug infestations. Now, if a Slugcat gives a pearl bug to a scavenger, it will be seen as an insult or a challenge and will usually not end very well for the Slugcat. Next up, snapping up at you from the brush is the vine mimic lizard, a large snake-like speciation of a green lizard, being just as bulky, even slower, and slightly more desaturated in color. The vine mimic hunts in 2 ways, either by laying flat on the ground and being perfectly still with its tail propped up, snapping at anything edible nearby with blinding speed, or using that very same tail to do as their name implies and mimic vines. In this state, they will fall down onto any prey that either comes too close, falls beneath them, or attempts to grab onto their tail, doing the same snapping with blinding speed thing as soon as possible. Unfortunately, despite both these pretty good hunting tactics, they aren't very good at chasing due to the whole lack of legs thing, and are very slow when directly moving on the ground. The final unique creature of the Shadowed Forest is the Conduit Queen. Guarding the entrance to the Great Tower's lower levels, the Conduit Queen stalks the air with nothing but violent intent. She is a giant, nigh-invincible, scalopendric nightmare, and the sole member of her species. Striking her scales from close range is a terrible idea, and not only will it reflect any spears before falling off, but will release an electric discharge which can stun you for a few seconds, more than long enough for her to take her fill. Although, when fallen off, these scales are quite useful as they are still full of electric charge, and throwing them at other creatures will similarly stun them with electricity. Now the only real counter to Conduit Queen comes in these scales, as striking her with one of her own scales will cause a cascade discharge. This will stun her for quite some time and allow the slugcat to get past and into the lower levels of the tower. Now, the interior of the tower is a whole different beast, with the lower levels being by far the most populated sections, if we count individual creatures, that is. The inside of the tower grows dark quickly. The absence of windows ensures that, and here we see, in the lower levels, the first omens of a much greater threat to come, as well as some of the even more sinister creatures that inhabit this tower. Starting with the Pipeworm. An uncommon occurrence within the lower levels is the Pipeworm, small garbage worm variants designed for clearing debris. They can often be found in burrows or old pipes, tossing garbage out as it accumulates, and when attacked, they will either throw or vomit up a flurry of debris and then flee to a different section of the tower. A clever slugcat, or scavenger, could use them to gain many spears, rocks, and maybe even pearls, as they have often been found to ingest these much more valuable or shiny pieces of the debris that they clear. Of course, you can only really get it if you manage to off one in time, which could prove difficult with the amount of rocks being thrown at your face. Next up are the slime mold growths. A bright orange mold extends down the walls of some rooms, at times a food source, at times an inconvenience. It seems to feed on the walls of the structure, which upon closer look appear to be mechanical, similar to iterator walls. I wonder what that implies. It grows in normal bulbs found around Rainworld, of course, but in larger quantities it can also serve as a threat, similar to the Proto-Daddy Longlegs, snaring Slugcat or slowing his movement, or even consuming him whole in larger amounts. Next up are the blue slime mold, a much rarer variant of the orange slime mold, possibly an almost cancer-like mutation to it. The blue mold is highly effective at poisoning and keeping the orange mold at bay, always having room to grow. It doesn't really need it though, as it grows really slow and doesn't spread very far. They are edible, and eating them will temporarily give the slugcat a faint blue glow and make him immune to the effects of the orange mold, a very useful occurrence, especially later in the tower. Next up, following with the slime mold example, are the molded lizards. What initially appears to be an orange lizard is instead revealed to be another agent of the mold. These lizards carry slime mold on their backs, forming a symbiotic relationship similar to a clownfish and an anemone. The molded lizard can freely traverse the usually deadly slime mold, and will hunt very similarly to a purple lizard, biting down on whatever prey they come in contact with. Whatever scraps left around the lizard's mouth will be consumed by the slime growing up its face. Uniquely, the mold has overtaken the creature's back as well, causing any entities that attempt to escape it by hopping over it to become stuck and subsequently easy prey for the lizard. Next up is the rib lizard. What initially appears as the corpse of a long-dead lizard soon reveals itself to be a much more threatening entity. The rib lizard is a terribly thin, desiccated lizard that is quite literally rotting as it walks. Despite this, it is incredibly quick and strong, and appears to mostly hunt other lizards. The nature of this creature's existence is odd, as it is not so much a lizard as it is the wriggling parasite taking refuge in the skull cavity of the lizard's already dead body, controlling its every move. Now the parasite is a fat, dull yellow worm with bristles on the sides of its body, appearing similar to a botfly larva. When the rib lizard succeeds in incapacitating its prey, other lizards, it will tear open the nape of their neck and allow the parasite to move down through a hole made to the corpse's throat to lay a large egg on the other lizard's brain. When the young is born, it will consume the brain and then proceed to pilot the lizard's body through what remains of the brain stem. At this point, the lizard is dead, and very dead at that point, and the creature inside has little interest in hydration or nutrition, so it only decays more and more. Despite this, its muscles continue to move, searching for more lizards to propagate into until its body has rotted into nothing, and the creature inside usually goes with it. The lizard's corpse itself is actually quite fast and strong, as mentioned before, due to the fact that the creature inside seems to have little care for the well-being of the body's muscles and bones. As the slug cat continues up the tower, it may choose to instead remain in the light of the outer rooms, our next region, consisting of the rooms near the exterior of the tower, still containing the light of the outside which pours in through open windows. The threats of this area mostly come in the flying predators which move in and out of these broken windows, as well as the entities coming in and out of the darker inner rooms to hunt. Starting off with the unique creatures of this region, the copper lizard. What seems to be a passing lump of rubble reveals a great set of jaws, and a unique species of lizard. Primarily seen around large structures where lots of rubble can be found, aside from their implied genetic modifications, copper lizards are a speciation of lizard very similar in nature to green lizards, slow and durable, but smart enough to camouflage themselves in the environment they inhabit. Despite this comparison, copper lizards are comparable in size to a red lizard, being almost 5 times longer than slugcat. However, they do not boast the red lizard's other unique traits, as they are quite slow and have no ranged attacks. Copper lizards are unique in the way that they hunt, by finding a good spot via climbing poles or simply walking and covering themselves in rubble, lodging in a spot that makes them significantly more difficult to spot. This can make them an annoying predator to unprepared prey, or those that simply don't have the ability to spot it. The copper lizards possess incredibly bulky and powerful jaws, and for those unlucky, they will oftentimes spell death in a single bite. On a more cheerful note, the Bumblebird is a mix between carpenter bee and parrot. The Bumblebird has no eyes, instead relying on echolocation and a large stinger to avoid predators. They have large fluffy bodies and curved beaks, and they eat nuts around the shaded forest and roost alone on the outside of the tower. A clever slugcat could grab onto one, similarly to a squidcata, to hop around. Now the Bumblebird would give quite a bit of upward momentum, as they want nothing but to flee the slugcat once grabbed. Additionally, if held on for too long, they will sting the slugcat, not causing death as they don't have very strong venom, but causing enough of a distraction to let the slugcat automatically let them go and collapse onto the ground. Next up, the Foxfly, a larger batfly that is seen in smaller groups. The Foxfly is seen primarily around the more open parts of the tower, in the skies and forests, and around the peak rarely. They are neutral, not passive, often floating around areas and observing the creatures there, but won't fear to annoy anything that has killed one of their number. Foxflies seem to have a communal nature, knowing if one has been killed even if no others were in view. When hostile, they will most commonly knock into the creatures in an attempt to drop it to its death. It is likely that they are native to the area, as the perfect environment allows them to grow to their substantial sizes, where they can serve as prey to a wider number of species, and even as predator to those that are smaller than them. And next up are the mimicry vultures. A comforting sound may reveal itself to be something much more sinister, bringing you face to face with the mimicry vulture. A deadly ambush predator, the vulture starts its hunt by landing on the windowsill of a large open room and beginning its call. They have highly advanced voice boxes that allow it to mimic any number of sounds, allowing it to draw in its prey with promise of food, companionship, or commodities. And of course, all that the foolish prey will find is a sharp beak, as the vulture spears its prey and makes off with its meal. The vulture itself is not actually that strong and will oftentimes lose fights with larger vultures in tussles around prey, though they make up for this with their agility and their deception prowess. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what on earth could possibly be worse than the outer rooms? Well, unfortunately for you, the answer to that question is the inner tower. Past the darkness lies an unknowable amount of rooms, each one pulsing with old life and the new life that devours it. Here, the slime mold that populated the lower levels grows more than a little bit numerous, and you see the truth behind what may have happened here. Starting off with a much more light-hearted creature, the lamp lizard. What seems to be a light of hope instead reveals itself to be the jaws of death. The lamp lizard is uniquely adapted to the conditions of the inner tower and are seen exclusively in there. Lamp lizards hunt by providing a glow similar to a lantern mouse, but only in small areas of them. They sit in one spot and wait, almost akin to an anglerfish, for something to get close. Once close enough to its prey, typically scavengers that wander too far into the inner tower, the lizard will spring into action and follow the sound of the creature's panicked breath and footsteps. Although blind, they possess a better hearing than most black lizards and must be snuck by or killed. Luckily, the latter is easy, as they do not possess head armor and are quite fragile. Anyway, next up, the harvester centipede. A slithering threat soon reveals itself to be a partially mechanical centipede, used a long time ago for menial tasks such as maintenance. These robotic servants have long since been taken over by the orange mold. The slime mold has corrupted the mechanical parts of the harvester, forcing it to hunt and bring food to the larger sections of the mold. The centipede has practically no ways to fight back, and even less agency over its own mind at this point. It hunts not via electric shocks, but instead through constriction. A slow and painful end for smaller prey, but luckily one that leaves quite well-preserved bodies for the slime mold to consume. Next up are the aptly named Big Slime Mold. A great hulking mass of mold proves more aggressive and more mobile than what would be expected, as tendrils pull it along the ground. Big slime molds act similar to daddy longlegs, though they are slower and much less vertically mobile. They are also much more common and persistent. They pull themselves along the ground, hunting anything that touches them, even each other. Despite their size, ranging from lizard to vulture, they are still only pieces of a much greater whole that lies at the center of the tower, and grow more common as you near it. And finally, the central slime mold. At the very center of the tower lies the heart of the mold. Having consumed the landscape around it, this mold has devoured something it really shouldn't have. The remains of an iterator. As the slugcat nears it, it beats in tune with random gods, projecting the signals found within 5 Pebbles' General Systems bus against the walls and itself. It does not hunt you. It does not appear aggressive at all. All it takes from the slugcat to finalize this agreement is to take one piece of the slime mold from the very center and eat it. This will grant slugcat immunity to the slime mold, as well as access to the final region of the area, the peak of the tower. I hope you enjoy my dramatic tone, because it will only get more dramatic from here as we get into the lore reveals. Atop the tower lies no creatures and no rain, a refreshing lack of danger from the inner tower. If the slugcat didn't visit the central slime mold, a great mass of impassable mold blocks its path. This mold will consume the slugcat even with the blue slime buff. Once it gets past the mold, utilizing the newly gained immunity to it, the slugcat follows a sunny pathway towards a great machine in the distance, before coming face to face with it and the corpse that lies at its base. Covered now in dregs of mold, an iterator puppet sits, deactivated against a machine that pumps void fluid towards the top of the tower. The puppet appears eaten, its artificial skin giving way to the metal beneath. It is missing its left arm, and appears to be connected to the machine through the data conduit that would normally connect it to the wall. The slugcat is able to collect a small chip from the puppet. Perhaps this could be used to discover just what happened here. Of course, that would only really matter to the people willing to wait a week for the next video to come out. The slugcat is eager to find out what the machine is for, and can climb it to find out. Atop the tower, the slugcat sees what is inside. A primordial strain of the void fluid, separated from the Great Sea, shining a brilliant gold as the sun reflects off it. It appears similar to the void that would be found in the sea as is, but something is different. It has Has it been distilled, fermented, fucking boiled? Something is different either way. The slug cat has a choice here, but if they choose to throw themselves in, the player will be treated to a separate cutscene, as the slug cat swims downwards and is progressively constricted, before not passing on or ascending. Rather, they remain, forced to watch as a specter, not dissimilar to an echo. For as it turns out... So anyway, that's the mod idea. Not every creature was able to make it in, and not every piece of art was able to either. So, if you want to see all the stuff that was cut, come on down to the Discord. Also, the BGM of this video was also a submission for the project, and there is a full album link in the description. Also, if you couldn't tell, the story of the peak is somewhat incomplete. I have another video in the works, an Iterator Logs episode on the corpse we find atop the tower, which was once an Iterator known as Silent Light. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope y'all will enjoy that when it comes out. Thank y'all for watching, and I will see you all next time.